So, Jane Austen friends, we're continuing on. I'm really deeply debating which book I should read next. Because there's two kind of smaller books, I think, Persuasion and another one is smaller, Mansfield Park, but Northanger Abbey and Emma are big, and lots of people know Emma, but I don't know the last three, so I just don't know which one to read next. Not that I'm not happy to be here. I'm happy to be here. I'm not trying to think of the next steps. I'm just excited about I am excited about the next steps. But also wanting to just be here. But also thinking of I have Persuasion and I have Emma, so maybe I should read one of those instead of buying a whole nother book. But one of them's really heavy. Which is the one that's really heavy and there's like an abusive woman, and every time people talk about it they're like trigger alerts, you know? So that's gonna be tough. I just don't want it to be like heavy, heavy. These have just been so light and fun. Persuasion is a really short book. Comparatively. So maybe I'll read that one next. Just to have a little palate cleanser before we get to something heavier. We're officially on volume 3. I don't know if all books have these volumes in them. I don't know why these volumes are here, and I'm sure something in this book will tell me, because this literally is like, all of this is like the appendix. The original Penguin Classic introduction by Tony Tanner. So I'm certain there's something in there about that. But chapter 1 of volume 3 of Sense and Sensibility. We just left John Dashwood and his wife Fanny Bobanny. Fanny's the worst, and she invited other people to come live with them instead of their literal sister-in-laws or whatever. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to read about it. So chapter 1, volume 3 of Sense and Sensibility. So excited. Mrs. Palmer was so well at the end of a fortnight that her mother felt no longer necessary to give up the whole of her time here, because she just had a baby. Mrs. Palmer just had a baby, and Mrs. Jennings had to go be there with her. That's right. And contenting herself with visiting her once or twice a day, returned from that period to her own home and her own habits, in which she found the Miss Dashwoods very ready to reassume their former share. About the third or fourth morning after their being thus resettled in Berkeley Street, Mrs. Jennings, on returning from her ordinary visit with Mrs. Palmer, entered the drawing-room, where Elinor was sitting by herself, with an air of such hurrying importance as prepared her to hear something wonderful, and giving her time only to form that idea, began directly to justify it by saying, "Lord, my dear Miss Dashwood, have you heard the news?" "No, ma'am, what is it?" "Something so strange, but you shall hear it all. When I got to Mrs. Palmer's, I found Charlotte quite in a fuss about the child. She was sure it was very ill. It cried and fretted, and was all over pimples. So I looked at it directly and said, 'Lord, my dear,' says I, 'it is nothing in the world but the red gum.'" Ooh, there's something in the back about that. The red gum sounds teething rash. God, babies get rashes when they're teething. My God. Okay. And nurse said just the same. But Charlotte, she would not be satisfied, a fretting mother. So Mr. Donovan was sent for, and luckily he happened to be just come in from Harley Street, so he stepped over directly, and as soon as ever he saw the child, he said, just as we did, that it was nothing in the world but the red gum, and then Charlotte was easy. And so just as he was going away again, it came into my head, I'm sure I do not know how I happened to think of it, but it came into my head to ask him if there was any news. So upon that he smirked and simpered and looked grave, and seemed to know something or other, and at last he said, in a whisper, "For fear of any unpleasant report should reach the young ladies under your care as to their sister's indisposition, I think it advisable to say that I believe there is no great reason for alarm. I hope Mrs. Dashwood will do very well." "What, is Fanny ill?" That is exactly what I said, my dear lord, I says. Is Miss Dashwood ill? Oh, okay, I see. Eleanor asked, what, is Mrs. Fanny ill? And then Mrs. Dashwood said, no, Mrs. Jennings said, that's exactly what I said, my dear lord, says I. Is Mrs. Dashwood ill? So then it all came out. And the long and the short of the matter, by all I can learn, seems to be this. Mr. Edward Ferrars, the very young man I used to joke with you about, but however, as it turns out, I am monstrous glad there never was anything in it. Mr. Edward Ferrars, it seems, has been engaged about this 12-month to my cousin Lucy. There's for you, my dear. And not a creature knowing a syllable of the matter except Nancy. Could you believe such a thing possible? There is no greater wonder in their liking one another, but that matters should be brought forward between them, and nobody suspect it. That is strange. I never happened to see them together, or I am sure I should have found it out directly. Well, and so this was kept a great secret for Mrs. Ferrars, and neither she nor your brother or sister suspected a word of the matter till this very morning. Poor Nancy, who, you know, is a well-meaning creature, but no conjurer popped it all out. Conjurer's also back here, too. Conjurer, one who is far from clever. Witches are conjurers, witches are clever. Conjure. Poor, but no conjurer popped it all out. Lord, thinks she to herself, they are so fond of Lucy, to be sure they would make no difficulty about it. And so away she went to your sister, who was sitting all alone at her carpet work, little suspecting what was to come, for she had just been saying to your brother only 5 minutes before that she thought to make a match between Edward and some lord's daughter or other, I forget who. So you may think what a blow it was all to her vanity and pride. Her sister being Fanny, not Marianne. Got it. She fell into violent hysterics immediately, Fanny did. With such screams as reached your brother's ears as he was sitting in his own dressing room downstairs, thinking about writing a letter to his steward in the country. So he flew up directly, and a terrible scene took place, for Lucy was come to them by that time, little dreaming of what was going on. Poor soul, I pity her, and I must say I think she was used very hardly, for your sister scolded like any fury, and soon drove her into a fainting fit. Oh no, so Fanny's like freaking out, and then that drove Lucy to go into a fainting fit? Nancy fell upon her knees and cried bitterly, and your brother, he walked about the room, and he said he did not know what to do. Mrs. Dashwood declared they should not stay a minute longer in the house, and your brother was forced to go down upon his knees, too, to persuade her to let them stay till they had packed their clothes. Then she fell into hysterics again, and she was so frightened that he would send for Mr. Donovan, and Mr. Donovan found the house in all this uproar. The carriage was at the door, ready to take my poor cousins away, and they were just stepping in as he came off. Poor Lucy, in such a condition, he says, she could hardly walk, and Nancy, she was almost as bad. I declare I have no patience with your sister, and I hope with all my heart it will be a match in spite of her. Lord, what a taking poor Mr. Edward will be, what a taking poor Mr. Edward will be in when he hears of it. I thought he was there. I thought he was pacing. Edward Ferrars was there. Okay. To have his love used so scornfully, for they say he is monstrous fond of her, as well he may. I should not wonder if he was to be in the greatest of passion, and Mr. Donovan thinks just the same. He and I had a great deal of talk about it. And the best of all is that he has gone back again to Harley Street, that he may be within a call when Mrs. Ferrars is told of it, for she was sent for as soon as ever my cousin left the house, for your sister was sure she would be in hysterics too, and so she may, for what I care. This engagement is going to kill everybody. I have no pity for either of them. I have no notion of people's making such a to-do about money and greatness, except she is the biggest to-do person of Money and Greatness. She loves gossip. It's so funny that she said that, Jane. So funny that she said that, Jane. I have no notion of people making such a to-do about money and greatness. That's going in the old highlighting section. That's so funny to me. And Mr. Donovan thinks just the same. He and I... Wait. 750 pesos. Oh, I definitely highlighted the wrong thing. That was crazy. There's no reason why on earth why Mr. Edward and Lucy should not marry, for I'm sure Mrs. Fraz may afford to do very well by her son. And though Lucy has next to nothing herself, she knows better than anybody how to make the most of everything. And I dare say if Mrs. Fraz would only allow him 500 a year, she would make as good an appearance with it as anybody else would with 8. Lord, how snug they might live in such another cottage as yours, or a little bigger, and with 2 maids and 2 men, and I believe I could help them with them to a housemaid, for my Betty has a sister out of place. That would fit them exactly. Here Mrs. Jennings ceased, and as Eleanor had had time enough to collect her thoughts, she was able to give such an answer and make such observations as the subject might naturally be supposed to produce. Happy to find that she was not suspected of any extraordinary interest in it, that Mrs. Jennings, as she had of late often hoped might be the case, had ceased to imagine her at all attached to Edward, and happy above all the rest, in absence of Marianne, she felt very well to be able to speak of their affair without embarrassment, and to give her judgment, as she believed, with impartiality on the conduct of everyone concerned in it. She's got the sense to not be as sensible as Marianne about it all. She's got faith in the universe, and the universe will provide no matter what happens. She knows that everything's going to be okay. She's got the sense. And I just did watch a video that was talking about Regency era books, and how the books around this time, everybody had a huge emotional reaction to everything, like Marianne does. So I think they said that Jane was kind of playing off and making fun of that, like, era of literature, of how everybody was like, oh, this painting, I'm going to faint because I love it so much, and it's extraordinary. And that's how people wrote back then. I don't have any examples of what books she was talking about, but it was a fun video to watch. Ellie Dashwood, I think. So, ever happy because she has sensibility to not impartiality on the conduct of everyone concerned in it. She could hardly determine what her own expectations of its event really was, though she earnestly tried to drive away the notion of its being impossible to end otherwise at last, in the marriage of Edward and Lucy. What Mrs. Fraz would say and do, though, she could not be a doubt of its nature. There could not be a doubt of its nature. She was anxious to hear if Mrs. Fraz is going to pass away from this knowledge that her son is going to marry some girl named Lucy. And still more anxious to know how Edward would conduct himself. For him, she felt much compassion. That's really nice, Eleanor. For Lucy, very little. And it cost her some pains to procure that little, for the rest of the party none at all. As Mrs. Jennings could talk on no other subject, Eleanor soon saw the necessity of preparing Marianne for its discussion. No time was to be lost in undeceiving her, in making her acquainted with the real truth, and endeavouring to bring her to hear it talked of by others, without betraying that she felt any uneasiness for her sister or any resentment against Edward. Eleanor's office was a painful one. She was going to remove what she really believed to be his sister's chief consolation, to give such particulars of Edward as she feared would ruin him forever in her good opinion, and to make Marianne, by a resemblance in the situations, which to her fancy would seem strong, feel all her own disappointment over again. If Eleanor can't be happy in love, and was doomed in my love, then what is the point? But unwelcome as such a task must be, it was necessary to be done, and Eleanor therefore hastened to perform it. She was very far from wishing to dwell on her own feelings, or to present herself as suffering much, any otherwise than as the self-command she had practiced since her first knowledge of Edward's engagement. Yeah, she's had time. She's had time to really grieve this somewhat loss, I'll say. She's had time. Practice first knowledge. Since her first knowledge of Edward's engagement might suggest a hint of what was practicable to Marianne. Practicable? Yeah, practicable? Her narration was clear and simple, and though it could not be given without emotion, it was not accompanied by violent agitation nor impetuous grief. That belonged rather to the hearer, for Marianne listened with horror and cried excessively. Eleanor was to be the comfort of others in her own distress, no less in theirs than in theirs, and all the comfort that could be given by assurances of her own composure of mind, and a very earnest vindication of Edward from every charge but of imprudence was readily offered. You have to be composed because everybody else is so emotional. But Marianne for some time would give credit to neither. Edward seemed a second Willoughby, and acknowledging as Eleanor did that she had loved him most sincerely, could she feel less than herself? As for Lucy Steele, she considered her so totally unamiable, so absolutely incapable of attaching a sensible man, that she could not be persuaded at first to believe, and afterwards to pardon, any former affection of Edward for her. She would not even admit it to have been natural, and Eleanor left her to be convinced that it was so, by that which only could convince her, a better knowledge of mankind. Her first communication had reached no farther than to state the fact of the engagement and the length of time it had existed. Marianne's feelings had then broken in, and put an end to all regularity of detail, and for some time all that could be done was to soothe her distress, lessen her alarms, and combat her resentment. The first question on her side, which led to farther particulars, was, "How long has it been known to you, Eleanor? Has he written to you?" "I have known these 4 months. When Lucy first came to Barton Park last November, she told me in confidence of her engagement." At these words, Marianne's eyes expressed the astonishment which her lips could not utter. After a pause of wonder, she exclaimed, 4 months? Have you known this 4 months? Eleanor confirmed it. What, while attending me in all my misery, has this been on your heart? And I have reproached you for being happy. It was not fit that you should then know how much I was the reverse. I really screwed that up. Let me do it one more time. It was not fit that you should know. No, that's not it. Hold on. It was not fit that you should then know how much I was the reverse. It's like a puzzle piece for my brain to put together. And I love puzzles, but this is a word puzzle. It's very difficult. 4 months, cried Marianne again. So calm, so cheerful. How have you been supported? By feeling that I was doing my duty. My promise to Lucy obliged me to secret. I owed it to her, therefore, to avoid giving any hint of the truth, and I owed it to my family and friends not to create in them a solicitude about me, which it could not be in my power to satisfy. Marianne seemed much struck. I have very often wished to undeceive yourself and my mother, added Eleanor, and once or twice I have attempted it, but without betraying my trust, I never could have convinced you. 4 months? And yet you loved him? Yes, but I did not love only him, and while the comfort of others was dear to me, I was glad to spare them from knowing how much I felt. Now I can think and speak of it with little emotion. I would not have you suffer on my account, for I assure you I no longer suffer materially myself. I have many things to support me. I am not conscious of having provoked the disappointment by any imprudence of my own, and I have borne it as much as possible without spreading it farther. I acquit Edward of all essential misconduct. I wish him very happy, and I am so sure of his always doing his duty, that though now he may harbour some regret, in the end he must become so. Lucy does not waste sense, and that is the foundation on which everything good may be built. And after all, Marianne, after all that is bewitching in the idea of a single and constant attachment, and all that can be said of one's happiness depending entirely on any particular person, it is not meant, it is not fit, it is not possible that it should be so. After all that is bewitching in the idea of a single and constant attachment, and all that can be said of one's happiness depending entirely on any particular person. Jane Austen was like a yogi, I think. She was like kind of a yogi. She sounds very wise. You can't just bank all your happiness on one person outside of yourself. Jane. Wow. Edward will marry Lucy. He will marry a woman superior in person and understanding to half her sex, and time and habit will teach him to forget that he ever thought another superior to her. If such is your way of thinking, said Marianne, if the loss of what is most valued is so easily to be made up by something else, your resolution, your self-command are perhaps a little less to be wondered at. They are brought more within my comprehension. I understand you. You do not suppose that I have ever felt much? For 4 months, Marianne, I have had all this hanging on my head, without being at liberty to speak of it to a single creature, knowing that it would make you and my mother most unhappy whenever it were explained to you, yet unable to prepare you for it in the least. It was told to me. It was in a manner forced on me by the very person herself whose prior engagement ruled all my prospects, and told me, as I thought, with triumph. This person's suspicions, therefore, I have had to oppose by endeavouring to appear indifferent where I have been most deeply interested. And it has not been only once I have had her hopes and exultations to listen to again and again. I have known myself to be divided from Edward forever. Without hearing one circumstance that could make me less desire the connection. Nothing has proved him unworthy, nor has anything declared him indifferent to me. I have had to contend against the unkindness of his sister and the insolence of his mother, and have suffered the punishment of an attachment without enjoying its advantages. And all this has been going on at a time when, as you too well know, it has not been my only unhappiness. If you can think of me capable of ever feeling, surely you may suppose that I have suffered now. The composure of my mind with which I have brought myself at present to consider the matter, the consolation that I have been willing to admit, have been the effect of constant and painful exertion. They did not spring up of themselves. They did not occur to relieve my spirits at first. No, Marianne. Then, if I had not been bound to silence, perhaps nothing could have kept me entirely. Not even what I owed to my dearest friends, from openly showing that I was very unhappy. Marianne was quite subdued. "Oh, Eleanor," she cried, "you've made me hate myself forever. How barbarous have I been to you? You who have been my only comfort, who have borne with me in all my misery, who have seemed to be only suffering for me. Is this my gratitude? Is this the only return I can make to you? Because your merit cries out upon myself. I've been trying to do it away. I've been trying to do it away. Because your merit cries out upon myself, I've been trying to do it away." The tenderest caresses followed this confession. In such a frame of mind as she was now in, Elinor had no difficulty in obtaining from her whatever promise she required, and at her request, Marianne engaged never to speak of the affair to anyone with the least appearance of bitterness. That's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to do for Marianne. To meet Lucy without betraying the smallest increase of dislike to her, and even to see Edward himself, if chance should bring them together, without any diminution of her usual cordiality. These were great concessions. But where Marianne felt that she had injured, no reparation could be too much for her to make. She performed a promise of being discreet to admiration. She attended to all that Mrs. Jennings had to say upon the subject with an unchanging complexion, dissented from her in nothing, and was heard 3 times to say, "Yes, ma'am." She listened to her praise of Lucy with only moving from one chair to another, and when Mrs. Jennings talked of Edward's affection, it cost her only a spasm in her throat. Such advances towards heroism in her sister made Eleanor feel equal to anything herself. They're being strong for each other. The next morning brought a farther trial of it, in a visit from their brother, who came with a most serious aspect to talk over the dreadful affair and bring them news of his wife. Nobody wants to hear about Fanny. Nobody wants to hear about Fanny. We don't care about Fanny. Sorry. "You have heard, I suppose," said he with great solemnity, as soon as he was seated, "of the very shocking discovery that took place under our roof yesterday." They all looked their assent. It seemed too awful a moment for speech. "Your sister," he continued, "has suffered dreadfully. Mrs. Ferrars, too. In short, it has been a scene of such complicated distress. But I will hope that the storm may be weathered without our being any of us quite overcome. Poor Fanny. She was in hysterics all yesterday. But I would not alarm you too much. Donovan says there's nothing material to be apprehended. Her constitution is a good one, and her resolution equal to anything. She has borne it all with the fortitude of an angel. She says she never shall think well of anybody again." When did she think well of anybody to begin with? "And one cannot wonder at it after being so deceived. Meeting with such ingratitude, where so much kindness has been shown, so much confidence has been placed. It was quite out of the benevolence of her heart that she had asked these young women to her house. No, it wasn't, actually. It was out of the hatred for the Dashwoods. She didn't want the Dashwoods to be there. She wanted these other 2 women to be there instead. That weren't her kin. Merely because she thought they deserved some attention, were harmless, well-behaved girls, and would be pleasant companions. For otherwise we both wished very much to have invited you and Marianne to be with us." Well, you did, and Fanny didn't want them there, so quit defending this monster you married. "Well, your kind friend there was attending her daughter. And now to be so rewarded, I wish with all my heart," says poor Fanny in her affectionate way, "that we asked your sisters instead of them." Here he stopped to be thanked, which being done, he went on. Do I sense a little gaslighting, perhaps? I don't want to throw that word around, but... Or is that just denial? Is that just heavy denial? "What poor Mrs. Ferrars suffered when first Fanny broke it to her is not to be described. While she, with the truest affection, had been planning a most eligible connection for him, was it to be supposed that he could be all the time secretly engaged to another person? Such a suspicion could never have entered her head. If she suspected any prepossession elsewhere, it could not be that quarter. There, to be sure, said she, I might have thought myself safe. She was quite in an agony. We consulted together, however, as to do what should be done, and at last she determined to send for Edward. He came, but I am sorry to relate what ensued. All that Mrs. Ferrars could say to make him put an end to the engagement, assisted too, as you well may suppose, by my arguments and Fanny's entreaties, was of no avail. Duty, affection, everything was disregarded. I never thought Edward so stubborn, so unfeeling before. His mother explained to him her liberal designs in case of his marrying Miss Morton, told him that she would settle on him The Norfolk estate, Norfolk estate, which, clear of land tax, brings in a good 1,000 a year, offered even when matters grew desperate to make it 1,200. And in opposition to this, if he still persisted in this low connection, represented to him the certain penury that must attend the match. His own £2,000, she protested, should be all his. She would never see him again, and so far would she be from affording him the smallest assistance, that if it were to enter into any profession with a view of better support, she would do all in her power to prevent his advancing in it. Wow. You only want women of this culture to marry rich, but you also don't want men to marry poor, or you're going to take all of their anything away and not even let them advance in a career if they choose one. Whoa, this woman is like fighting against the patriarchy in her own family. Hey, Marianne, in ecstasy of indignation, clapped her hands together and cried, "Gracious God, can this be possible?" "Well, you may wonder, Marianne," replied her brother, "at the obstinacy which could resist such arguments as these. Your exclamation is very natural." Marianne was going to retort, but she remembered her promises and forbore. "All this, however," he continued, "was urged in vain. Edward said very little, but what he did say was in the most determined manner. Nothing should prevail on him to give up his engagement. He would stand to it, cost him what it might." "Then," cried Mrs. Jennings, with a blunt sincerity no longer able to be silent, "he has acted like an honest man. I beg your pardon, Mr. Dashwood, but if he had done otherwise, I should have thought him a rascal. I have some little concern in the business, as well as yourself, for Lucy Steele is my cousin, and I believe there is not a better kind of girl in the world, nor one whom deserves a good husband." John Dashwood is saying all this in front of Lucy's cousin. John Dashwood was greatly astonished, but his nature was calm, not open to provocation. He never wished to offend anybody, especially anybody of good fortune. He therefore replied without any resentment, "I would by no means speak disrespectfully of any relation of yours, madam. Miss Lucy Steele is, I dare say, a very deserving young woman, but in the present case, you know, the connection must be impossible. And to have entered into a secret engagement with a young man under her uncle's care, the son of a woman especially of such a very large fortune as Mrs. Ferrars, is perhaps altogether a little extraordinary. In short, I do not mean to reflect upon the behaviour of any person whom you have a regard for, Mrs. Jennings. We all wish her extremely happy, and Mrs. Ferrars's conduct throughout the whole has been such as very conscientious, good mother, in like circumstances, would adopt. It has been dignified and liberal. Edward has drawn his own lot, and I fear it will be a bad one." Marianne sighed out her similar apprehensions, and Eleanor's heart wrung for the feelings of Edward, while braving his mother's threats for a woman who could not reward him. "Well, sir," said Mrs. Jennings, "and how did it end?" "I am sorry to say, ma'am, in most unhappy rupture. Edward is dismissed for ever from his mother's notice. He left her house yesterday, but where he is gone, or whether it is still in town, I do not know. For we, of course, can make no inquiry." "Poor young man! And what is to become of him?" "What indeed, ma'am? It is a melancholy consideration, born to the prospect of such affluence. I cannot conceive a situation more deplorable. The interest of £2,000, how can a man live on it? And when to that is added the recollection that he might, but for his own folly, within 3 months have been in the receipt of £2,500 a year. For Miss Morton has £30,000. I cannot picture myself a more wretched condition. We must all feel for him, and the more so because it is so totally out of our power to assist him." He's only talking about the money. He's not talking about anybody's happiness. He's not talking about love. Like, I get people want people to be practical. I get that. We live in a world where we need money, whatever. But people gotta be doing what they need to do. They love who they love. What's the deal? It's like this idealism. It's literally sense versus sensibility. Idealism versus practical. Wow. Jane's captured it all. My goodness. Wow. Poor young man, cried Mrs. Jennings. I'm sure he would be very welcome to bed and board at my house, and so I would tell him if I could see him. It is not fit that he should be living about at his own charge now, at lodgings and taverns. Eleanor's heart thanked her for such kindness towards Edward, though she could not forbear smiling at the form of it. Right, everybody keep their cool. If he would only have done as well by himself, said John Dashwood, as all his friends were supposed to do by him, he might now have been in his proper situation, and would have wanted for nothing. But as it is, it must be out of anybody's power to assist him, and there is one thing more preparing against him, which must be worse than all. His mother has determined, with a very natural kind of spirit, to settle that estate upon Robert immediately, which might have been Edward's on proper conditions. I left her this morning with her lawyer, talking over the business. Wow, she's immediately giving the estate to Robert, Edward's brother. The dandy. The coxcomb. The coxcomb's getting the estate. Well, said Mrs. Jennings, that is her revenge. Everybody has a way of their own, but I don't think mine would be to make one son independent because another has plagued me. Marianne got up and walked about the room. Can anything be more galling into the spirit of a man, continued John, than to see his younger brother in possession of an estate which might have been his own? Poor Edward, I feel for him sincerely. A few minutes more spent in the same kind of effusion concluded his visit, and with repeated assurances to his sisters that he really believed there was no material danger in Fanny's indisposition, that they need not therefore be very uneasy about it, he went away, leaving the three ladies unanimous in their sentiments on the present occasion, as far at least as it regarded Mrs. Ferrars's conduct, the Dashwoods and Edwards. Marianne's indignation burst forth as soon as he quitted the room, and as her vehemence made reserve impossible in Eleanor and unnecessary in Mrs. Jennings, they all joined in a very spirited critique upon the party. A spirited critique. Fun. Long chapter. Crazy goings on. The cat is out of the bag about Edward and Lucy. Ooh. All right, y'all. The slow burn to the end of this book. Next time, chapter 2 of volume 3 of Sense and Sensibility. Happy reading, everybody, and ta-ta.